feels. What if one small change in the way you drink your morning coffee could lower your fasting blood sugar enough for your doctor to notice at your next lab draw, without a single new pill, supplement, or expensive protocol? Before your next sip feels, there is something important you need to hear that could change the trajectory of your metabolic health for the rest of your life. I am not selling anything. I am not promoting a brand. I am not handing you a miracle formula, feels. I am talking about the drink sitting in your kitchen this very moment, and one detail that, depending on your current pattern, is either helping your glucose regulation by about 10% per cup or quietly sabotaging it every single morning, feels. That detail is timing and composition. Nothing more. I have followed hundreds of patients with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes in my practice, especially adults over 60, feels. What I am about to walk you through is a small set of refinements that has produced measurable, lab-confirmed progress in many of those patients within 6 to 8 weeks without changing a single prescription, feels. Why this matters right now: Brazil is facing a quiet, compounding metabolic crisis. According to data released through Brazil's Ministry of Health and the Vigitel Adult Surveillance System, feels. Self-reported diabetes prevalence among Brazilian adults has climbed substantially over the last 2 decades. National surveillance estimates place adult prevalence at roughly 10% of the population in recent years. Among seniors over 65, feels. Prevalence climbs toward 1 in 3. That is higher than most people imagine, and it places Brazil among the highest burden countries for type 2 diabetes in the world. What I worry about most is not just the patients who already carry the diagnosis, feels. It is the much larger group right on the edge. Adults in their late 50s and 60s with fasting glucose creeping above 100 milligrams per deciliter, with unexplained fatigue after lunch, with constant thirst, feels. With slightly swollen ankles by evening, who either have not been diagnosed yet or who have been told to take a pill and simply wait for the disease to progress. Stay with me to the end, feels, because I will show you a series of refinements to your CUF routine that cost nothing, require no products, and can produce a meaningful, measurable, lab-confirmed difference in fasting glucose and HbA1c, feels. One piece of foundational biology first. Your pancreas is a small hormone factory. Its primary job is to produce insulin, the hormone that opens the doors on your cells so glucose from your bloodstream can enter and be turned into energy. When you eat, feels. Glucose rises in your blood. The factory ramps up, releases insulin, the cell doors open, glucose enters, your energy stabilizes. The system works. The trouble begins when this factory is asked to do too much, too often, feels. With too little recovery time between meals. Refined carbohydrates hit the bloodstream fast. Insulin spikes. Cells get flooded and begin to downregulate their insulin receptors to protect themselves. The pancreas, sensing the response is weaker, feels. Produces yet more insulin to chase the same effect. Insulin resistance is the predictable downstream result, and that is the metabolic doorway through which type 2 diabetes walks. Now, what does any of this have to do with coffee? Feels. Coffee is a biochemically extraordinary beverage. It contains well over 1,000 identified compounds, but 2 carry most of the metabolic story: chlorogenic acid and trigonylene. Both are polyphenols found naturally in the coffee bean, feels, and both survive roasting in meaningful quantities. Think of them as traffic controllers operating in your small intestine. When you drink coffee before a meal, feels, these polyphenols slow the rate at which glucose from the carbohydrates you are about to eat crosses into your bloodstream. Instead of a sharp glucose surge that overwhelms the pancreas in a single pulse, you get a smoother, feels, more controlled inflow that the insulin system can manage without metabolic stress. A clinical study published in Diabetes Care, the official journal of the American Diabetes Association, feels, conducted by Van Dijk and colleagues at Wageningen University with affiliation to the Harvard School of Public Health, examined exactly this mechanism. The researchers found that chlorogenic acid and trigonylene, feels, given separately before an oral glucose tolerance test, significantly reduced early glucose and insulin responses in the first 15 minutes of carbohydrate absorption. Glucose dropped on the order of half a millimole per liter, feels, and insulin dropped on the order of 73 picomoles per liter, both clinically meaningful shifts. This is the biochemistry your coffee routine can lean into, or accidentally work against, every single day. Mr. Arnaldo, feels. The pattern I see over and over. Let me tell you about Mr. Arnaldo, 72 years old, retired. Proud that he had been drinking coffee every day since he was 17 when he came to my office, feels. His fasting glucose was 138 milligrams per deciliter, and his HbA1c, the marker that reflects his average blood sugar over the prior 3 months, sat at 7.1%, above the recommended target for his age. He told me, "Feels. Doctor, I do everything right. I drink coffee every day. I walk 3 times a week." I asked him to walk me through his coffee routine in granular detail, not just what he drank, but when, with what, and in what order relative to food and physical activity. Feels. That is when I found the issue. Every morning, the moment he woke, before eating anything, he drank a large cup of strong black coffee. Then another cup at 3 in the afternoon, paired with a sweet biscuit. Then a third cup before bed, feels, because he believed it helped him wind down. 3 mistakes, all common. All worth correcting. Mistake 1. Coffee on an empty stomach, right after waking. This is the most common mistake I see and the one doing the most silent damage. Feels. When you wake after a full night of fasting, your body is already running elevated on cortisol. Cortisol is naturally higher in the early morning, and it signals your liver to release stored glucose into the bloodstream so you have fuel to start your day. Feels. It is a survival mechanism hardwired across every human population. The problem is that caffeine amplifies it. Caffeine stimulates your adrenal glands to release additional adrenaline, and the liver responds by releasing even more glucose into the blood. Feels. You have not eaten a bite of food, and your fasting reading has already climbed 20 to 40 milligrams per deciliter before breakfast even begins. Clinical research from the University of Bath, published in the British Journal of Nutrition, Feels, found that strong black coffee consumed before breakfast substantially increased the blood glucose response to breakfast by roughly 50% in the subjects studied. Continuous glucose monitoring has confirmed this pattern in many of my own patients. Feels. Mistake 2. Coffee with sugar, artificial sweetener, or heavy cream. Adding a spoon of sugar to your morning coffee causes an immediate glucose spike that, on its own, cancels most of the chlorogenic acid benefit you just consumed. Mechanistically, Feels. It is like lighting a controlled fire and pouring gasoline on it. Many patients move from sugar to artificial sweeteners, believing they had solved the problem. They had not. Feels. A study published in Cell by Suez and colleagues in 2022 found that 10 weeks of sucralose consumption induced gut dysbiosis and altered glucose and insulin responses even in healthy young adults. Feels. A 2023 review indexed in PMC on aspartame points in the same concerning direction. Shifts in gut bacterial composition tied to glucose intolerance in both human and animal studies. Feels. A large cohort study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in early 2025, led by M. Hen and colleagues at the Harvard School of Public Health, analyzed 3 major American cohorts. Feels. Coffee consumed without any additives was associated with a 10% reduction in type 2 diabetes risk per additional daily cup. When coffee was consumed with added sugar, the protective effect dropped to roughly 5% per cup. Feels. The numbers come directly from the published hazard ratios in that paper. Coffee with additives lost half of its protective power, and that loss came from 1 spoonful added to 1 cup. Mistake 3. Feels. Coffee late in the afternoon, or at night caffeine, has a half-life of roughly 5 to 6 hours in the average adult. If you drink coffee at 3 in the afternoon, about half of that caffeine is still active in your bloodstream at 9 in the evening. Feels. It keeps cortisol elevated. It suppresses melatonin release, and it interferes specifically with the deep slow wave and REM sleep stages, where most of your metabolic recovery actually happens. Feels. This matters for glucose because sleep disruption directly worsens insulin sensitivity the next morning, and the effect compounds if it repeats. Feels. Poor sleep and poor glucose form a vicious cycle that most people never connect to the cup they drank in the afternoon. When I walked Mr. Arnaldo through these 3 mistakes and we rebuilt his routine together, his numbers moved quickly. In 8 weeks, Feels. His fasting glucose dropped from 138 to 112. His HbA1c fell from 7.1% to 6.6%. No new medication, no radical diet, no gym membership, no supplement. Feels. Just 3 small corrections to how, when, and with what he consumed his coffee. The right coffee, right time protocol. Now I will walk you through what to do instead. 3 specific moments in the day where coffee either works with your metabolism, Feels, or quietly against it, and exactly what to do at each one. The order matters more than most people realize. Moment 1, the breakfast window. Not right after waking. When you wake, drink a glass of plain water first. Wait between 30 and 60 minutes. Feels. Eat a small portion of protein. A boiled egg, a piece of cheese, plain unsweetened yogurt, a few slices of turkey, any whole food protein source within your dietary pattern. Only after that protein, drink your coffee. and drink it plain, feels. Without sugar and without artificial sweetener. Why protein first? Because protein blunts the cortisol-amplifying effect of caffeine. The amino acids give the liver a more efficient substrate to work with, feels, and that prevents the unnecessary release of stored glucose into the bloodstream that empty-stomach caffeine otherwise causes. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, supported by broader endocrine literature, feels, supports this sequential approach. Protein or fat before carbohydrates consistently reduces the post-meal glucose spike. If you want to enhance the effect further, add roughly half a teaspoon of plain cinnamon, the Ceylon variety when you can find it, feels, to your coffee. Cinnamon contains polyphenols including methyl hydroxychalcone polymer, a compound that partially mimics insulin's action at the cell surface. A systematic review and meta-analysis published in Diabetes Care in 2013 by Allen and colleagues, feels, found a modest but consistent reduction in fasting plasma glucose across included trials, and a 2025 review in Nutrition Reviews continues to support a meaningful metabolic effect, particularly in adults whose baseline glucose is already elevated. Feels. Cinnamon is not medicine. It is an ally. Used as part of a structured routine, it stacks with the protein step and stacks with the timing step, and the combined effect is more than any one of them alone. Moment 2. Feels. 20 to 30 minutes before your main meal. This is the most overlooked moment in the entire day, and the one with the most untapped leverage. About 20 to 30 minutes before lunch, or whichever meal is your largest of the day, feels. Drink a small cup of plain black coffee, no sugar. The chlorogenic acid will be active in your small intestine right at the moment you begin eating carbohydrates, slowing the rate at which glucose from those carbohydrates enters your bloodstream, feels. This is the practical, real-world application of the diabetes care study I cited earlier. Chlorogenic acid and trigonelline reduce early glucose and insulin responses within 15 minutes of carbohydrate ingestion, feels. Pre-meal coffee delivers those polyphenols to exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, before the carbohydrate has even begun to break down. The effect of any single cup is small. The effect repeated daily for years is large, feels. It measurably reduces the size of the post-meal glucose spike, and post-meal spikes accumulated hundreds of times a year are one of the main drivers of insulin resistance and progressive pancreatic exhaustion. This is free metabolic leverage, feels, and almost no one uses it. Moment 3. Within 30 minutes after physical activity. If you walk, do any aerobic activity, or do resistance training, do this within 30 minutes of finishing the session. Drink a cup of plain coffee, feels. When your muscles are still active, their insulin-independent glucose transporters are highly upregulated. They act like open sponges, pulling glucose out of the bloodstream to refuel the work they just did. Caffeine at this exact moment amplifies the uptake, feels, helping muscles absorb glucose even more efficiently. Most people reach for coffee before exercise to feel energized. The bigger metabolic benefit often comes from coffee after exercise, when the muscle sponge effect is still wide open, feels. How much coffee is the right amount? The World Health Organization and most mainstream medical guidelines consider up to 4 to 5 small cups per day, consumed within a healthy pattern, to be safe for most healthy adults. The Karlstrom Review, feels, published in Nutrition Reviews from the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, analyzed 30 prospective studies covering well over 1 million participants, feels. It confirmed that moderate coffee consumption is associated with roughly a 30% reduction in the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, with the protective effect rising in a dose-dependent pattern up to about 6 cups per day. Importantly, feels. Both caffeinated and decaffeinated coffee showed the benefit. The protective compounds are not the caffeine alone. They are the polyphenols, including chlorogenic acid and trigonelline, which survive the decaffeination process in most quality decaf products, feels. Individual response to caffeine varies substantially, much of it genetically determined by variants in the CYP1A2 gene. If you feel palpitations, anxiety, tremors, or poor sleep from coffee, your caffeine metabolism is likely slower than average, feels. In that case, drop to 2 cups per day, or switch to a quality decaffeinated option that retains chlorogenic acid. What about my sweet coffee? I know what some of you are thinking. Doc, I have been drinking sweetened coffee for 30 years, feels. I am not giving up my sugar. I am not asking you to give up your coffee. I am asking you to upgrade it. Try the protocol for 4 weeks straight. Track your fasting glucose at home if you have a glucometer, feels. Or simply notice how you feel by mid-morning and again in the afternoon. What I have observed in practice repeatedly is that when patients move from sweetened coffee to plain coffee with cinnamon, feels, or plain coffee with a small amount of natural stevia leaf extract, the mid-afternoon energy crash softens measurably within 10 to 14 days. They sleep more deeply within 2 to 3 weeks, and their fasting glucose, feels, when they recheck at the lab at the 4-week mark, has often moved enough to catch their doctor's attention. The protocol is not about what you lose, it is about what you gain. Danielle, the second patient I want you to meet. Let me tell you about Danielle, feels. 68 years old, a retired school teacher. She came to my clinic with type 2 diabetes, diagnosed 3 years earlier on metformin with glucose still stubborn to control. Her HbA1c had been hovering above 7.5% for more than a year, feels. She followed her medication faithfully, had already reduced her portions of rice, and yet something was still not clicking. When I walked through her day in detail, I found the same pattern. Sweetened coffee with milk first thing in the morning, feels. A second coffee in the afternoon paired with the sweet biscuits her granddaughter delivered weekly. Almost no movement, because her legs had felt heavy for many months, and she assumed the heaviness was permanent. We built a simple plan together, in writing, feels, on a single sheet of paper, breakfast. She waited 45 minutes after waking, ate 1 boiled egg, and drank plain coffee with half a teaspoon of cinnamon. Pre-lunch, a small cup of plain black coffee 20 minutes before eating. Afternoon, feels, a 25-minute walk 3 times per week, followed by a cup of plain coffee within 30 minutes. We removed the sweetened afternoon coffee and the packaged biscuits from her daily routine, without drama, without a fight. 6 weeks later, feels, she returned to the clinic with a smile I will remember for years. Her HbA1c had dropped from 7.5% to 6.8%. Her fasting glucose was 109 milligrams per deciliter. She told me, looking me in the eye, feels, "Doctor, I woke up with real energy this morning, for the first time in years. I did not change her medication. I did not refer her to a nutritionist. I changed her relationship with coffee, and I added back 2.5 hours of walking per week." Feels. The 4 invisible enemies of coffee. Now I need to warn you about 4 specific enemies that destroy everything I have just described and that you might be inviting into your cup without realizing it. Enemy 1. Sugar of any kind. Refined, brown, demerara, feels, even honey. Anything sweet creates an immediate glucose spike that meaningfully blunts the protective effect of chlorogenic acid. The Hen 2025 Harvard study made this very clear. Coffee with sugar lost half of its protective power against diabetes, feels. Enemy 2, artificial sweeteners. As I explained earlier, growing evidence links sucralose and aspartame to gut microbiota disruption and to altered glucose responses. If you genuinely need to sweeten, try a small amount of natural stevia leaf extract, feels. The least studied negative option among sweeteners currently in widespread use. Enemy 3, industrialized instant coffee. The single-serve sachets and instant powders often contain hidden sugar, hydrogenated fats, preservatives, feels, and additives that compromise polyphenol content. Prioritize fresh ground coffee, ideally 100% Arabica, brewed at home. Enemy 4, coffee paired with ultra-processed foods. White bread in the morning, filled cookies mid-afternoon, feels, packaged cakes on weekends. Pair coffee with these, and the glucose spike from refined carbohydrates is so high that no meaningful amount of chlorogenic acid and no meaningful dose of insulin will fully compensate. Coffee does not rescue a bad meal, feels. It only has room to help when the rest of the meal is built on whole foods. The protection triad coffee works even better when it sits inside a small, complete framework of habits. I call this framework the protection triad, feels. 3 elements that amplify each other. Element 1, smart coffee. The way I have already taught you at the right moments without sugar or artificial sweeteners. Element 2, daily movement. You do not need a gym membership, feels. 25 to 30 minutes of moderate-paced walking, 3 to 5 times a week, is enough to dramatically improve insulin sensitivity. Active muscles pull glucose out of the bloodstream through insulin-independent pathways, feels, an effect confirmed across decades of consistent research. Element 3, adequate protein at each main meal. Protein is the macronutrient with the least direct impact on blood glucose, builds satiety, and preserves muscle mass, feels, which is your body's largest glucose consumer. After age 60, protein needs increase because the body becomes less efficient at using it. Include a source of protein at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Eggs, chicken, fish, beans, cheese, plain yogurt, feels. Anything whole. When these 3 elements work together, the effects multiply. Coffee improves insulin sensitivity. Movement increases glucose uptake by muscle. Protein stabilizes post-meal glucose and preserves the tissue that actually burns the glucose. Feels. The triad costs almost nothing, requires no special products, and is built from the habits you already have, just retimed and recomposed. Feels. An honest note about what this is and what it is, not everything I have described today, is a complementary lifestyle strategy, supported by published research and the mechanistic physiology we have walked through together. Feels. These are not replacements for medical evaluation, not replacements for follow-up with your endocrinologist or primary care physician, and not a substitute for any medication you have been prescribed. Feels. If you have been diagnosed with diabetes and are on medication, never change your dosage on your own. Never stop taking your medication on your own. Bring this video or these ideas to your prescribing clinician. Discuss them together. Feels. Make adjustments under professional guidance. Lifestyle protects what medication buys. Medication protects what lifestyle buys. Together, they are strongest, and you deserve both. Your action plan for tomorrow morning, if you want to start tonight, Feels. Here is the simplest version you can run tomorrow. Wake up, drink a glass of water, wait 45 minutes, eat 1 boiled egg or a small portion of plain yogurt or 2 slices of cheese. Then drink your coffee, plain, Feels, with half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon if you have it. 20 minutes before your main meal, drink a small cup of plain black coffee. If you walk or do any exercise, drink a cup of plain coffee within 30 minutes of finishing. Feels. Drop the afternoon sweet biscuit and the bedtime cup. Replace them with nothing at all. If you are going to do this, tell me in the comments which of the 3 mistakes from earlier you just realized you were making. I read every single comment, Feels, and those comments directly shape what I cover next. What to do next if this content is helping you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next video. In it, Feels, I will walk you through 5 ultra-processed foods that people with prediabetes need to remove from their kitchen as soon as possible. Feels. Because they are silently driving glucose up in most Brazilian households, and almost nobody connects the dots until a routine lab test flags it. Share this video today with one person in your life who is right on the edge of prediabetes, Feels, or who already lives with type 2 diabetes. Quality information shared with love is one of the most powerful interventions in modern medicine. You may be giving someone the missing piece that keeps them off additional medication for another decade. Feels. I will leave you with one thought I have carried with me for years in practice. Your body is not your enemy. It is constantly trying to balance itself, heal, and adapt. When glucose rises, when fatigue will not lift, when your ankles swell in the evening, Feels. Those are signals. They are requests for attention from a system that is doing its best. And very often, those requests are answered not by another prescription, but by a small change in the way you drink a single cup of coffee. Feels. Health does not live in the pharmacy. It lives in daily habits, in the small choices you make every day, and in the willingness to make one single change before tomorrow morning. Start with the water, then the protein, then the cinnamon, Feels, then the small cup before lunch, then the coffee after the walk, one small change at a time. Your future self will thank you. I will see you in the next one.